in the coming months, and that's expressed in the language that they're pre-saying now. And so all of our words, our whole language actually encodes all of this information, layer upon layer upon layer, that could just drive you crazy if you start me off on it. Because pre-saying, presage, forecast, start looking at the roots of the words, the etymology of how all this evolved. And you see that we've been doing this for countless generations. And our own language, taken from ourselves, encodes deeper levels of meaning than our conscious mind is aware of. And I'm not talking about the funny fellows that going out and reverse speech and try and find hidden information and stuff like that. I'm talking about just linguists and what they know about how closely connected are particular expressions of language, no matter what language it is on the planet. And DNA. DNA itself is a language. And it starts tunneling in, and you start getting all these cross connections, and you end up with a view of the universe that says, I wonder what people are saying today.
Right. Well, that's actually very good. In the sense, for an example, if you say death, it can appear to be very limiting, but if you say release, you're actually talking about death, but it's from a very positive point of view.
But I'm not into sugarcoating anything. I come from a tradition that is, I'll be flat out about it, it's Aikido, and I follow Osanse's metaphysical approach to things, and that relates all the way back to what's known as the complete reality school of Taoism. So no, death is death and needs to be treated as death, and it's positive or negative is someone's personal view of how they're going to deal with that. And all death is traumatic and painful until the moment of separation and unconsciousness. It doesn't matter. And there are positive deaths, good, bad. I've been involved with a lot of deaths in the after-death experience for people. And it's, you got to face it flat out. I don't like sugarcoating. I'm going to get
right, except that you have to, you yourself are using this word release language. And, and it's kind of, there's something about that is, there's actually, as you are tracking, each word does contain an emotional connotation, and actually the nature of the word release has within it certain
correct. And release within
aspects.
In the context if we go into our death context within our model space, you'll find the word release in there. But release is being taken at a broader and a different context, in this case where we're just talking about the expression. But it could be. And there's nothing to say that all of the fearfulness, the wave, if you will, the big bubble or envelope of people being afraid of the mega death that is coming, that's expressing itself as everyone worrying about pandemics and all these other things, as well as people worrying about the kill-off from the powers that be. That is probably, in the nature of our work, a giant level of future knowledge. The fact that we're afraid of it, the fact that we're discussing it, the fact that we're actually involved with those words at this time, it tells us something about what's coming down the next few years.
In other words, a sort of a self-warning.
Correct.
Okay. Well, okay, this has been very, very interesting, and I can see how you can really go down a rabbit hole as far as layer upon layer and getting into this. By the look of things, do you think that, for example, and I know in a sense you maybe haven't been at this long enough, but is it possible that you could be looking at an event and a whole, structure of things that actually suddenly could shift or change and go in complete opposite direction to what you thought it was going to be?
Oh, sure, we're wrong all the time. That's why I say release language could be good release language. Hooray, hooray, the parade's passing. Or bad release language. Oh, how sad that the dog died. That kind of thing, right? So release language is neither good nor bad. So, but we could be certainly misinterpreting it. We could have from October 7th until sometime in the end of February, everybody could be quite happy because the politicians get it right for once, the banks cooperate, the Federal Reserve does the honorable thing, and so on and so on and so on, and we're all happy with the economic condition, and then everybody lays down their arms and isn't shooting at each other anymore, and the Israelis and the Palestinians embrace each other as their long-lost cousins that they truly are. Now, you tell me if the odds favor that.
Okay, but what I really want to know is not whether the odds favor that, but whether or not the language and the model you're tracking indicates that. And my guess is that it does not.
No. And I believe that we would pick that up. I don't believe we could be on that side of duality without knowing we were there.
Okay. So is it possible for you to say at this time that there is a positive change or that there is an action that people could take that would change, for example, what seems to be a timeline, if you will, that they've agreed upon, pre-agreed upon?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm not that smart. I hope that that would be the case. I kind of like the idea that maybe we could all get together and decide that this particular set of fears isn't going to be realized. And that was certainly the premise of the generation I grew up in and all of the political action in the 60s. Whether it actually works at a timeline level, I cannot say. There's nothing I can recommend. I would be, as I say, I'm no one's guru. I'm just out here. I'm more like the oracle at Delphi, and you take from it what you can and intrude into your life with it, and some people have been successful at doing that and others haven't. So you really don't want me to say that, oh, go and do X, Y, Z. And I don't want the karmic implications of that.
No, but I did see a positive event that had to do with chemtrails that you talked about, that somewhere in Europe there's going to be an event such that it's going to clear the skies, you even said.
Right, but that may not be positive, because the chemtrails appear to be the powers that be attempting to change the albedo of the planet and to reflect back radiation. All other supposition is their activity seems to be secondary. If they're gone, we may suffer greatly. We don't know that. Chemtrail pilots and those people that put the whole program together may be absolute heroes, even though they may end up killing, untold numbers of humans. Maybe other untold numbers of humans will survive, and the species will flourish because we're able to reflect the radiations that are incoming, and there won't be that level of damage.
Well, let me ask you this. If, in a sense, my understanding of chemtrails is you're saying the secondary effects may not be positive, but the primary might be exactly what you say it is. But if it's secret language and it's not released, how is it that you think you could be tracking it? Because my understanding of what the chemtrails are doing is something else entirely. And it sounds like you haven't tapped into that. So if it's secret, it's not going to be talked about.
Right, but we don't deal in things that are talked about. We don't count words. We deal in archetypes and then up through a interpretation apply them to what we see around us. So, for instance, we've got an archetype of a maritime disaster that would cause the whole United States to go into a great sorrow. And we got all of this information, and it turned out not to be maritime per se, because we were off in the interpretation of that archetype, and we should have just translated it as a ship, and then matched it closer to reality and decided it was the shuttle, the spaceship. So we get some of these things wrong, but at the same time, we don't deal in conscious words per se. We deal in the archetypes and let it bubble up from that. So our understanding of chemtrails comes from the archetypes that the powers that be are intensely scared. They're scared at all these different levels. Let me take a sip of water here, but one of the things they're scared about is not going into an ice age. If we don't go into an ice age, as in Lovelock's book, Gaia is doomed to go the way of supposedly Venus and get extra hot and everybody will die off. And so usually at this particular point in our orbital permutations, we get to the 100,000-year cycle and we go into a mini ice age, which cools everything down, refreshes the oceans, etc., etc. That is not occurring at this point because we're lining up with the dark rift on the side of the galactic central, and we're getting extra radiation coming on in, which is heating everything up. Everything from the GRBs, the solar radiation, the heliosphere radiation pouring on in, and etc., is raising the temperature on all the planets, in spite of the fact that at this point in our cycle of 100,000 years, we should be cooling down to the betterment of the planet. So the powers that be got really scared, and at least at one bespoke level of their internal fear, they wanted to react and change the albedo by putting up a radiation shield that would cool the planet down as though we had glaciers all over the place, as though we had gone into the ice age. They hoped to trigger it that way. Now, there's also all kinds of other fears buried way down deep in the archetypes that go to some really strange stuff. Like they're really afraid of the pineal gland in humans. And part of that is
the consciousness of our own power. And on top of that, also alien invasion. And on top of that, what about Planet X? And what are you getting in that respect?
The Planet X stuff is a non-starter. It appears to be almost 100% disinformation from our viewpoint in terms of what we call SCED. The subject knowledge elucidates the domain. It's an analysis technique. And within our data set, none of the Planet X material is as it is mythologically defined within our current culture. So yeah, there's probably large-sized asteroids, etc., zipping around and even some mini planets, but there's no giant dwarf star kind of thing that's going to come on in and cause that kind of problem, because the solar system at one point cannot survive such a thing. It does not allow, for instance, the whole mythology does not allow for what we call those are the quanta effects of interplanetary kinds of material. In other words, not just gravity, but there's also anti-gravity, a repulsive force. And so those kind of things intrude in the idea. Plus, in our data sets, Planet X is within a very deep subset of what we call the space coast parts in an area of disinfo. We've never shown any of the Planet X info emotionally in the context in which we use to come out of that category.
Okay, but it sounds like you're putting your interpretation in terms of the science that you know versus not being able to talk about the science you don't know.
Okay, there is that. There certainly is that certainly is the case, but